TikTok, the time is 12:09.
We have a few folks with some issues with the link, so just getting them set up here so they can join us. Just working through some folks having issues with the link, so it'll be a couple of minutes till we get started.
Hey, Tracy. Tracy, can you hear me?
Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't hear Tracy.
Tracy's on mute.
Hey, Mason, can you hear me at all? I can't hear.
Oh,
you.
now we can hear you. Can you hear us, Tracy?
How's it going, guys?
Hey, Andres.
Hey, Andreas. Hey, Mason. Tracy's having audio issues.
Awesome. Well, we can just get started.
Let's do it.
I don't actually have like a slideshow or anything. Do you guys have like an intro to slideshow that you want to show?
I do not have an intro slideshow, but your background is awesome, so it kind of looks like a slideshow.
Sweet. Hold on. Tracy, can you hear us now?
Oh, I can hear you now. Yay.
Do you have like an intro slideshow to get started with?
No, I do not.
Okay, cool. I really just prepared a demo for this one because I wanted to get through some of the nitty gritty.
Totally fine.
So I'm going to share my screen. How do I do so? Where's that at?
Share screen button. Do you not have it? I might
I
have to
don't.
give it some additional permission here.
I sure do not.
We probably have to make him a host.
I can raise my hand.
What about now? You're already a presenter, it says. Now you're presenter and moderator.
Is it simulcast?
That's a good question. I don't know.
What the heck? Can't tell. I don't really use.
You might have to request. It says there's a a presenter requests button, but you are, I mean, maybe I'll just toggle it because it shows you as presenter already.
I
You
might
never know
have
what you're gonna get with Bevy.
a crazy way to do this.
You're going to replace your camera with your screen?
All right, toggled it.
Do you see the share screen button at the bottom of your Bevy?
I see it. I don't know about Mason.
That totally works, but we can't zoom into. Can we zoom into your screen? Oh, I guess we can, but it's pretty low res. And I don't think we can hear you.
Like, I don't know why changing my camera muted me.
Yeah.
But if you go to the top right, there's like a speaker view, and it should be able to
Oh,
make me bigger.
But it's still
The
super
reason-
low res compared to the regular.
The
is there
reason
a,
you can't see it is because I'm in 4K. Give me a second. I got that nice stuff.
I'll go on mute here.
Is this more visible, less visible? Ah, it's less visible.
Yeah, it's not.
You don't see the share screen button?
No, I don't even have it.
Yeah, it's weird. You're moderator instead of presenter, and everyone else is a presenter, which is the worst part.
Yeah. What about presenter request? There's supposed to be a queue for this. I don't see any.
Let me see if I make this like a larger screen, if it does anything. Maybe the button just isn't showing up for me. Yeah, okay, I just... All right, I figured it out. Share screen only works if your thing is wide enough, the button. Otherwise, the button doesn't even appear.
You have to be able to see the button.
Yeah.
It's good.
All right, it looks clear as day now.
There you go.
Turn my background on again. It better look clear. I had to set it to 1080p for all y'all.
Crispiest 1080p I've ever seen.
All right. All right, off to a good start. So today is, what is it called? Clicks to resilience. Yeah, so clicks to
Yep.
resilience. Basically what we're gonna do is a lot of the like UI automation stuff is on the Academy that you can get, but I'm gonna go into a little bit more detail on UI automation, specifically with things like object repository, dynamic selectors, table extraction stuff, and how to play with those, and just general like tips and tricks that I go through. So I'm going to go through a couple of demos of automating a few screens, and we'll probably run into some cool use cases and scenarios. I have a few screens that I like to do automation on that typically need some of the more like custom logic. Give me a second. Here we go. All right. So I've just got a blank process here, and I'm going to upload this to GitHub for everybody and send out the GitHub link so y'all can download it and play around with what we've got here. I'm going to create workflows that are inside of this to just show what's going on, or to actually build the automation. So the first thing that we need to do when you create this project is obviously install UI automation activities. This is the package that is going to give you everything that you need for UI automation in UiPath. I'm on Community Edition 25.10.16, so Studio looks pretty new on this one. If you're working within an enterprise, it might be lower version like 24.10. So it'll look a little bit different, but everything works pretty much the same. 25 is just when they updated a lot of the UI in Studio, so it looks slightly different. Takes a little bit to download this package. The first thing that I'm going to do is we're going to start with the good old RPA challenge and just work through that. And I am going to point out how object repository works with this, and what selectors look like and what generally is going on inside of those selectors. So if you've been with UiPath for a little bit doing RPA, then you know kind of what a selector is. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail of how those selectors are constructed and how to explore them a little bit more in depth and pull in more fields in those selectors. So I'm going to go ahead and create a workflow here. Just going to create a sequence, call it RPA challenge. And I'm going to pull this guy over here. This is our website. This is the RPA challenge. If you've gone through, I don't know if it's in the new Academy, but if you've gone through UiPath Academy, this is used in there. So I'm going to go ahead and use this application, use browser. So this is the first activity that goes in. So basically when you're going into UI Automate, everything is wrapped inside of a use. So there's browsers and then there's desktop applications. So say I was to automate Studio itself, I could like indicate that application, or I could indicate a browser. When you go to indicate, there's going to be a green box around the application that you indicate. And then there are ways to get around with this selector. So when I select something, right, when I hover over something, this box is going to form to the application that I'm trying to select, right? Kind of gets annoying. If you hit F2, it'll give you a timer for where you can navigate around, right? And then it'll come back. So that's first little handy tip when you're building selectors. Remember F2. We're going to start with RPA challenge, so I'm going to select that. When I select an application, we get a browser URL or an application path if it's a desktop application, right? You can change that URL. You can take things out of that. Maybe it's a nested URL. You can wildcard inside of that URL. So say you have an application where you're going to multiple pages, like a single page application or a spa. So that will navigate to different screens by building a URL tree. It might be something like, I think the RPA challenge actually has this inside here. So this is the homepage of RPA challenge. If we go to shortest path, see now we're at assets, shortest path, public. Let's take this screen instead. Indicate that. Indicate descriptor. Now we have this
Mason?
entire Yep, go ahead.
Mason, are you also showing the web browser? Are you attempting to?
Oh, is it not showing it?
It is not.
Of course not. Let me fix that for you. I thought I was sharing the correct thing. Oh, it's entire screen. There we go. There we go. This is the web browser.
Thanks.
There we go. I'll walk back through where we were. So this is the RPA challenge screen. I went to shortest path here. And so this is our URL, right? When I pull in a screen, we get this URL. Say I was automating on multiple tabs, and I just want to use the same browser, like you're navigating. I might put a click inside of here that goes to a different URL. you can always wildcard, right? And it'll work. So that's a nifty little trick there. With this, there is a descriptor right here. And this little icon right here is like our object repository icon. This takes you to object repository. Now, in newer versions of UiPath, object repository is on by default, and it'll figure out when you're reusing things, and it's pretty smart. You used to have to do this manually, but now it's like always connected. When I click this, you'll watch over here to my right. This is object repository. It's going to be in, or not the right, to the left. It's going to be in this pane. It used to be over to the right. Now it's over to the left. But if I was to be on project and I click this little guy, it opens up object repository, and my descriptors and selectors are in here. Descriptor is basically a term used to describe, like, we have the description as well as the title of an element, and then the selector is contained in that. So the selector is what highlights the element, what selects it in UiPath, but the descriptor is a better description of that. And basically, the reason we have a descriptor is more for your AI agentic type workflows, so that UiPath can understand and get some context about what's going on here. Um, and then also link that to the application. Why is this read only? That's curious. There we go. So this is what it looks like. We have our browser URL, and then we also have a window selector. So this is actually a top level selector. If you're used to classic activities in UiPath, you'll know that selectors are built one line at a time. And the top thing, the top part of the selector is a window selector. This comes in as an XML snippet. So we've got our beginning and closing brackets, and then different parts of the selector will be different lines. So this will be the top level, and then there will be lines underneath of that. This one, the window selector, gives us the application, right? And then it also gives us the title. This title is actually going to map to your tab name, right? So we have automation challenge here. That's the name of this tab inside of the window. So there's two things that it's mapping: the URL and the title of the tab, right? That's how browsers work generally. In an application, it's a little bit different. But we're going to stick to browsers for right now. So let's say I want to type something in. That's a type into activity, right? And then when I indicate anything that's inside of a use browser, it's going to recognize that browser, right? Right now, my browser's not pulled up. But because we have the top level, right, or not the top level, but we have the start of the URL, it's recognizing this URL, right? But if I go anywhere else, it's not going to recognize anything. So outside of this application or browser, it's not going to recognize elements. So I can't like go over here and select things on my desktop. If I was to, let's say, indicate target, indicate descriptor, and then take that longer URL, navigate back to where it's just the base URL, and try to select inside of there. No, it still pulls it in. Oh, that's neat. So it's still recognizing that URL. I think it's using the tab name there, maybe. Normally that wouldn't be able to recognize that, but maybe UiPath is smarter now, so it's able to recognize that. What I want to show you is kind of a broken selector, but we'll get to that. So now I'm just going to show what a selector is for an element. So we have the window selector. I'm going to select this again just for this top level application. I'm going to select this component right here. So this is a text box, right? if I go around, you can see there's plenty of different elements in here. It's going to recognize these based on the HTML. If you're using computer vision, it is going to recognize those based on just building the like the computer vision understanding. So it'll go in and look at different buttons and recognize those as buttons, and you'll have kind of a similar experience to this, but it might not pull everything in. It might get extra or less depending on what you're looking at. Um, but in this one, we have a type into that's in the role-in company. Um, when we click that, it's going to pull in a few different things. Now, I'm using the new experience. There is a classic experience with different types of selectors. I recommend using the new experience because it's kind of uniform across Studio Web and Studio now. And the old experience has some things that like aren't really used, like fuzzy selectors. They didn't really add much to regular selectors, so now um, they really just use the regular selector these days. And there's a selector editor in here, which is really handy. We'll go back for just a second. So we have a selector, right? That's what we pulled in when we selected this element. We have a computer vision, right? We have a target, right? This is our actual element. This is what's in green, right? This is our target. We can use computer vision or selectors. I normally turn computer vision off because I don't want it to mistake this, because right, this is like, because we have the anchor, it'll get it, but like this might match other components on the screen, so I just generally don't use computer vision. You can also use an image, so that'll find it by image. The semantic one is new for the healing agent. Turn that on, it'll enable the semantic version of this. This is in preview right now, but basically the healing agent is like a generative AI that goes in and recognizes your control based on the semantics of it, and then can fix that selector to find by finding it on the screen. So you give it a description of what it is. So it's an input field under the role in company, right? And so if this selector changes in the future, it'll get it. We're going to focus on regular selectors for right now. So our target and our anchor, these are the two important ones. So our target is the element that we want to target, right? So when we're typing into, we want to type into this field. But you'll notice, right, if we just had a target, that it's going to be the same as all these other type intos, right? Like all of these are just a blank bar, nothing inside of them. And when we go over here, we can view the levels of the selector and see what's inside of that. So if we look at it, it's got an input tag, right? We've got an ID, we've got some classes, we've got an AA name, we've got CSS in here. So your HTML and CSS are part of this. You can use those to select. But there's nothing specific, right? There's nothing that is specific to this text box over this text box over this text box. And you can have fuzzy matches, regex matches, and strict matches. Strict is going to be it's looking directly at that thing and making sure that it's exactly the same. Fuzzy is more of like a character match, and then regex is using a regex expression to match those. What these in here are all coming from the HTML of that component. When you're using a desktop application, it uses different technology, but it'll show up the same in here. It won't be from HTML. It'll be from like Windows descriptors of that component. But we've got an ID, we've got a tag, a type, class, AA name. One important thing about selectors as you're building them is to show or to kind of gather what is a hard versus an inaccurate selector. When I talk about like a hardened selector, I am talking about a selector that is going to be specific enough for the component on the screen, but also general enough that it's resilient to changes in that screen. So one thing that's very specific about this screen is our ID changes a lot. And this is something that you'll see a lot is dynamic IDs. So if you have like a table or like a carousel view in a website, things like that, your ID can be generated every time you load that page. So the ID might be different. So if you have ID set to strict, a lot of times it'll fail on different reloads of that page. So I can just take that out of here, right? It used to be that you would have to delete that line out of the selector, but now we have this selector like Explorer built right in, which is pretty nice. All right. Turn the accuracy up. This really only affects fuzzy. The strict ones are always going to be strict. They're always going to look for exactly that word, but your fuzzy selectors have like a percentage match. So when that changes, but it looks about the same, right? It'll be that. And then you can turn text on. This one doesn't have text inside of it, but like buttons, if I was to select a button, it would have like a text inside of it. And so you can match that. So say I selected this EN button over here. Let's do that real quick. So I can re-indicate. I'm going to go over here to EN. We're looking at this button. Let's edit the selector. Let's see. Where do we get our text? There we go. So we can pull in the EN text, and that'll match all of the buttons that have EN inside of it. Another cool thing is down here, if you're trying to find one, like trying to find just this button, finding one match, right? It's going to find the EN button. It's going to use strict selectors. If I find all matches, it changes those to fuzzy, right? And now that we have this fuzzy selector, we turn the text off. If we turn the text on, it's going to find the one because it knows the text inside of there is going to match. But now we have a bunch of different matches in here. And you can cycle through these matches with the arrows or by clicking them, and it'll show all of the things on the screen. And I'm going to F2, make this smaller so that we can look at things on the screen. It's really thinking about it. Might have to reopen this. There we go. So we've got the EN button, going into our selector, find all matches, yes. So now I can go through each of these. So it's picking up RPA challenge up here. It's picking up invoice extraction, pretty much everything on here that's a button, right? So this selector wouldn't be specific enough to find the button that I want it to find. It's going to find all of these matches on the screen. And it's also going to give me, the green one is the one that has the highest score, right? But look at these, they have a match score that's lower. So it's going to select the right one, but the fact that it is like this means that it is picking up other ones, and it's finding one that's the closest match, which means that the selector is going to work, but it is kind of fuzzy if it's going to get the right thing or not. We can turn our accuracy up and validate again, and now we have a 1 of 1 selected. So what is accuracy, right? Accuracy, again, only affects fuzzy selectors versus strict selectors. When you turn it to 1, the fuzzy selector is just a strict selector. So there's like no difference between a 100% selector accuracy fuzzy selector and a strict selector. If I turned it down to 0, right, it's going to pick up all of them. They come in default 0.5. I don't really use fuzzy selectors all that much. I normally just keep things strict because I like to see that. You see when I turn it to strict, it's got the 1 match, right? Because this EN in here is going to be strict. Typically, you know what your control is going to look like, and just by looking at the selector, you can kind of figure out what's going on there. Let's look at some of the classes in here. These classes are coming from HTML, so these are HTML classes. They're a little bit generic, right? We have drop-down dash button, which if there's another drop-down on the screen, it's going to find that one. But maybe we want to go through all of the drop-downs on the screen for whatever reason. We can use that. We can pull this class in, and we can delete parts out of the selector, right? So I could get rid of this button here. I could get rid of this color class, right? I can wildcard, right? I can do different things with that selector, validate it, Okay, so it didn't find it. Let's wildcard it. Now it's validating it, right? So that class has extra fields in there. The wildcard is the star key. So if you're used to Windows or C# or VB, that's pretty common with strings. So wildcard is star. Always remember that because that's really helpful. So I wildcarded this and it matched the whole thing. I don't know if I can go back. There we go. So this is what the class looks like, right? It has all of these in here. And because we're strict, it's going to try to strict match that, which isn't a contains, right? It's actually 100% match. But if we have the wild card in there, it's going to match with all of those other things. So that's the anatomy of a selector. I'm going to go ahead and re-indicate. We're going to go with this one here. Talk about anchors for a second. So what is an anchor? When I talked about this guy earlier, right? He looks just like all of these ones. And if you look at the selector, they're the same. That's why we have this web page to kind of train you how selectors work. So you have to use an anchor with these. The anchor shows up in blue up here. And it also has a selector. That is how we find an anchor. Everything's a selector. The reason why we use anchors is normally for like a type into text box like this, there's going to be like a header or a label above it. And that's pulled in as an entirely different element. The way that the anchor works is it says, okay, this one's like right by this one. So it corresponds to this text input. So we're using an anchor that is specific to, see, there's Roll and Company up here, and we're pulling Roll and Company as well, right? Doing that fuzzy. We could do it with one accuracy, right? And we're going to get that one every time. It's got text already on here. So it knows that that's our anchor. And so we can be confident that we're going to find this element, even though it matches all of these other text inputs, because of our anchor. Our anchor is actually pointing to the label that is specific to that text box. I can confirm this guy, and then we can look at it in UiPath Studio. It shows up over here in Object Repository. This is where all of our selectors are going to go. So we have kind of a tree list, right? At the top level, we have our application. The level underneath of that, we have our window or screen, and then the level underneath that is our element. So these are the controls on the page. We can go in and edit that element, right? For some reason, they're just coming through as read-only. I think you have to create an actual UI library to edit these, but there's the element name, there's the type, so this one's an input. It has a unique ID for that one. If we want to look at the descriptor, we can edit descriptor, and it's going to pull up this guy again, so we can play around with that again. We can highlight it, which is pretty nifty. It'll show it, right? It's highlighting both the element and the anchor there. I'll do that again because that was pretty quick. So we got the green box and the blue box there. So a lot of different things there. I'm not going to go too much into the activities themselves, like what the type into does. I really want to focus on selectors and object repository with this one. There's different ways to use variables inside of your selectors as well. So if I was to edit my target, edit descriptor, go in here, right? I can edit this guy, use variable, right? And your handy dandy key shortcut always is Control K when you want to use a variable. That's pretty consistent across Studio. Let's say I want to go through and select each of these with a variable, like I want to loop through them. I just want to use one thing and then hit all of the controls in here, right? It's not going to be in this selector, right? Because this is the element selector and there's nothing specific, right? So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go to my anchor selector. I'm going to go in to edit it, right? And then we've got this guy here. I can say header. That's going to create a variable called header. And then I can go over here and I can use my header variable again, right? Save that. So something that's pretty nifty about using variables is when you use a variable, it's going to have a default, right? So this is role and company. That just allows the selector to work pretty much when you go in here to debug it. But then you have to give it a value for all of these. So let's confirm this guy. I'm going to put a for each loop in here. And I am going to create a list of strings down here in our data manager. Headers. Let's call this a list. Of string. I'm using C# for this. So this is how I create a list of strings in C#. In VB, it's a little bit different. So now I'm going to pull 2 of these out of here. I'm going to take role and company. And then I'm going to take, let's say phone number real quick. Right. And then I'm going to go through that list. Headers. And instead of using a type into, I'm going to use a highlight activity. So we've got highlight here. This just highlights on the screen. I'm going to use this little box here to search my object repository and pull in my role and company control, right? And I should probably change the name of that guy because it's no longer specific to role and company. When I look at my descriptor, it's pulling in my variable header. So I need to set that variable. If I don't set it, it's going to be defaulted. And you can see the default down here in Data Manager. You can see it's defaulted to role and company. I'm going to assign that variable real quick. And you can't just directly use headers inside of this. So you have to use this string here. I'm going to use current text because that's what I'm pulling from my for loop, right? And that's going to go in here and highlight that. Let's unlink from object repository real quick. If I unlink, then it brings up the selector directly, just like this. So it can still do that. The reason we use object repository is so that we can reuse this guy around here. There's a bunch of different ways to get your object repository guys in here. You can use this guy. You can reuse or create a new one. If I reuse, right, it's going to pull in the selector that matches. I can also drag and drop my object repository selectors on this guy. So if I was to create a different highlight, right, I can drag my guy in here and pull him in. So object repository is helpful for just speeding up the dev process. So now I've got it set up to where it's going to loop through a couple of different headers. It's going to go through role and company and phone number. And I'm just going to debug this and we can see it go in and highlight that application. So let's run this. And remember, our dynamic selector is actually, oh, well, it'd be nice if it actually went to that. I think there's a way to make it pull that up. Let's see. Resize window, maximize. There's no way to pull it to the foreground. So I'm going to do this again just so, and then bring up the web page. So now it's going through and highlighting. So it's doing this in a dynamic way, right? So it's using phone number and role and company. So let's look at it when a selector is just bonked. Let's see what happens when a selector is broken. Let's put a 2 after role and company here, and then edit our element. I think this will work. Go into our descriptor. Nah, it didn't work. Doesn't pull that variable dynamically. I have to click this unlink, right? Confirm, validate. So now we're broken. We've got 0 of 0 matches. This is what a selector that can't find looks like. So if it can't find it, it's going to be red. You're going to have to fix that selector. Sometimes you'll go into a screen and things will change. Maybe your ID changed. You go into validate and it doesn't find it. You're going to have to, you can re-indicate, but you're going to have to figure out why your selector broke, basically. This one, we know that it's because I changed this variable, but maybe the selector breaks for some other reason. Like if we pulled in the CSS selector, right? There's all of this, but maybe we have something that's too specific in here. And let's say the other here, and we validate it. It's not going to find that. And we might need to make it more general. There's tons of ways that selectors might be too specific or too general. We walked through too general when it was finding all of the buttons on the page. Too specific is when you reload that page and it can't find the same thing that you already indicated. UiPath is pretty smart when you indicate an element. It'll get like 99% of the way there. And you might have to fix like the last little bit. And generally, if you just reload the page, you'll find what your difference is pretty quick. Sometimes selectors can be a little bit more tricky. I don't really have an example right here, but just knowing these tools is how you get around tricky selectors, right? So I showed us dynamic selectors. I showed us strict selectors, fuzzy selectors. Now I want to go through and I don't think we have time to really complete this whole page. And I'm not too picky on showing you guys all of the different activities. I really want to focus on selectors here. There's different ways that you interact with applications in selectors, and there's different UiPath, like UI automations activities in selectors. There's different ways that you can pull in a bunch of selectors in an object repository. I do want to show that real quick. So if I go up here to capture elements, right, I can hit record, select my browser. Now it's got my application. I can start selecting elements, right? Got that one, go back here. And I'm clicking the screen every time. See, it's pulling those in really quick. This is like the quickest way to grab a bunch of selectors using object repository, record functions, right? And now I've got all my selectors on the page that I would ever need, right? Role and company, phone number, first name, last name, and address. And I could type into all of these really quickly. I can also, in this screen, edit selectors. I can give a type, right? I can change my type if it's an input, a button, all of this, right? That's going to go and inform your selectors in object repository or your descriptors, sorry. Give it a description. The description is helpful for, say, you're doing a coded workflow or you're automatically generating a workflow with autopilot. Giving it a description will help the AI agent understand what that control is for. So if you're able to describe it a little bit, that'll help it. This one looks a little bit different. So we have a fuzzy selector and a strict selector, right? It's not like fuzzy parts of the selector and strict parts of the selector. So this is using kind of the old way. And we still have our anchor in here, right? What does our anchor look like? It's got the text in it. So all of these are pretty good. You can highlight, right? So you make sure that you got it right on all of these. So this screen is really helpful for grabbing a ton of selectors. You can also hit capture all elements and it'll go even faster. Sometimes it's not reliable, but now it's going to go through and get literally everything on the screen, right? And I can go in and select and deselect which ones I don't want. Maybe I don't want these top ones, deselect them. or pull them in, select them. I can deselect all, select all, right? This is going to get everything. I can hit capture text, and it's going to get the text inside of those. Hit capture. It's going to capture each element and loop through them. You see, it's smart enough to pick up our anchors and everything. So, like I said, it gets you like 99% of the way there. It'll also detect your duplicates, so it won't re-add those, which is really handy. It dropped all of those under my phone number element, which is kind of funny. You can drag and drop these to reorder them like this. Right, so say I want all these under the application like it is. Something that I find pretty helpful with object repositories, because you can nest elements under other elements, right? Like, let's say I was working with this language drop down here. I'll pause this real quick. Right, when I go over to hover over that, there's things underneath of it, right? So let's say I want to grab those things. I can hit record, right? I can hit F2, and the timer is going to run out. And now I can grab these different selectors here. Maybe computer vision is really slow on me today. Yeah. Gonna run into trouble here. I need that to load, but I can't click it. If I click it, this thing goes away. It's kind of annoying. So you're just gonna have to trust me here because computer vision doesn't want to work. But underneath of this, there's going to be 3 more selectors for each of these, right? There's going to be one for English, RO, Japanese. I don't know what RO is. That Romanian? But like you can select your language underneath this dropdown. So it is helpful to nest things. Let's say if you select this guy and then record, it creates the selector like underneath of. Oh, sorry, I just got that one. There's a way to do this. Check this guy. Selector's good. Let's say we wanted this control underneath. I can add it like this, right? And now it's nested under there. And so if you think about like best practices, you could say things like that drop down or elements that are in a screen that you have to click through. You can nest your controls under each other, and that kind of gives the developer who's reusing your object repository elements an idea that like, hey, this selector like means that it's nested, so I have to interact with the selector above it. You might also group these based on like maybe all of these inputs you want to put in an input category. So you can add those. You would have to do that in object repository. So I'm going to hit save this, and it'll pull in all of my selectors here. So I can create an element inside. I could say input form, and I could give it any of the types that are in here. Let's say I want to give it, where's my guy? A container or a form, right? A form type is probably the most. There's not necessarily an element for this. You don't even have to give a selector for a descriptor. So now I have this form right here, my input form, and I know that all of my inputs belong to that input form. Can pull them, no, get out of here. I can pull those in just like this and know that they're all in the same place. You could give this input form a selector and kind of step people through. Like maybe you have to click a button before the form comes up. Give it a selector. It needs to be clicked. There's a lot of different reasons you might want to organize this logically, but you have full control over what it looks like. All right. That's that. What are we at? 11:53. Let's do, I have another page pulled up here. Let's look at this guy, because this is a fun one. This is a random phone number generator. It's going to generate 6 different things here. And those selectors aren't going to be super specific. and they're always going to be different. So let's explore those here for a little bit. Let's change our, now, you know what, I'll create an entirely new. Let's add a sequence. Use application browser. Select our application here. And let's pull in another highlight and look at what these selectors look like. So we've got a match, and the selector is number 1 here. So they are specific. But maybe if we didn't have that, like number 1, we would have to pull in like the text, right? And validate. But if I was to generate 6 more, hit F2 real quick, hit generate. It takes a second to generate numbers. Then we validate. It's still able to find it. It's because I didn't save that selector. Give me a second. AA name. There we go. Save it. F2, generate. All right, now we have 6 different numbers. So now it's broken because it's changing every time we generate new numbers. We could show candidates. I don't need that right now. So we have this AA name that's too specific. We take that out, and then we're able to find phone number 1. Let's wildcard number here and find all matches. Validate. Now we are able to match all of these, right? And loop through them. There's different ways that you could loop through them, right? If you know that that selector, you're generating 6 every time, you know that it goes through 1 to 6. We could do what we did with the for each loop. There's a different way to do this. And it requires that we have generic selectors. There's a for each element activity for each UI element. This one's pretty cool. I like this activity. So now we get this. This is a new window for grabbing selectors. This is a window that really lets us grab like generic selectors for when there's going to be multiple things on a screen. You'll see this window for each UI element and also for data table extraction. So when we go to extract a data table. So when I click on this guy, it's going to grab, now see, look, it grabbed 3 of them. Didn't grab all of them. Right, and now it's able to figure those out. So the more I select, the more it's able to figure out what my elements are. It doesn't give us a selector, right? It just gives us the current element. I can confirm that. Save and close. Let's preview it. Right, so those are our elements here. It'll highlight them. No limit. Let's save and close it real quick, because I feel like, if I'm correct, it's gotta be too specific. You can go in here, add element. Still is not letting me go into the. That's really annoying. I don't know why I'm not able to see that descriptor. That's really annoying. Yeah, can't see that descriptor right now. But with this one, you can also configure filters and say current element contains. This is going to be the text inside of that element to match that. So when I go through and let's say I was to highlight, instead of pulling selectors in, you want to do some dynamic stuff. We can use input element up here inside of this control and pass a UI element. All of your different activities that use selectors, they will have a current or not a current element, but an input element and an output element. So when you interact with something, it'll give you an element out that you can pass into other controls. And so does your application, actually. Your application selector is going to give input and output. And so you can pass those around, and it allows more of this dynamic behavior. So if I go through this, it's going to highlight each of those, or it should, unless it's broken. Here we go. Do we have a broken selector? We might. So we have a broken selector here, it looks like. Oh, it didn't throw. My highlight didn't work. Pull in a different highlight. Give it the current element. There we go. So that highlight already had an object repository element in it. So one thing about these loops is if it doesn't find one, it just returns 0 instead of breaking, which can be a little bit annoying. So I'm going to indicate this guy again. And highlight that element. Yeah, it's not pulling them in. This would be nice if I could actually look at that target a little bit better, but it's not letting me. Yeah, I can't look at the descriptor or the metadata. It's because I think it's because I'm in the project and not in an actual UI library, but I'm not sure why that is. It's not working today. But yeah, this is how you would loop through things. It's not working for this one. I'd have to go in and debug, but we're already over time. So I'm going to hand it back to Tracy. But this is a high level of object repository and selector navigation, how to use those and think about them.
Yep, and I don't have much of a voice, but should anyone have questions, feel free to come off of mute. I believe everybody should have access to do so, or if you can't for some reason, then put a quick question in chat. So we'll give you a minute or so to do that. Otherwise, if you guys need to run, you can do that as well.
And I will, I'm going to upload this to GitHub. And then Tracy, I will give you the link to the public GitHub for people to pull it down.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. We'll also have, there'll be a follow-up email. I believe it comes out in 2 days, where we'll have the recording that we'll put out there. And the presentation will probably just be the one slide with the access to GitHub. So you guys can follow along if you'd like.
Yeah, and I feel like something that would be really complementary to this is because we talked about selectors today, but like the activities that you can use selectors inside of. So if we want to have a second session, that's something that you could ask people about.
Yep.
But I do have to run. I'm missing a meeting currently.
Okay. Well, perfect.
Yep.
So we'll let everybody drop off, and then should anybody still have outstanding questions, feel free to send them, and I'm sure Mason would be happy to answer them offline.
Yep, absolutely.
So thanks everyone, and thank you, Mason.
Thanks.